Episode 1: The Mirror That Doesn't Reflect Light. They told me not to go into the chapel, that the place had been sealed for a reason, that no candle ever stayed lit there after midnight, that some mirrors are not made to show your face, only your soul. But when your mother leaves behind a suicide note with no words, only a torn page from the book of Revelation, you stop listening to what they say. The door groaned open like something alive, wounded inside. It wasn't dusty, it was wet, as if the walls themselves were sweating regret. Mildew crept over the pews like moss on forgotten graves. The altar was split down the middle, as if lightning had struck straight from heaven. And above it all, the Virgin Mary. Her statue was still intact, but something was wrong. Her face had no eyes. I moved closer, and that's when I saw it. A thin black curtain behind the altar, torn slightly, just enough to reveal the glint of something dark but not glass. Not exactly. It wasn't hung like a mirror. It stood like it was guarding something, or waiting. I shouldn't have pulled the curtain, but I did. Behind it stood the mirror, tall, narrow, framed in rusted iron vines. It didn't shine. It swallowed the light, and when I looked into it, I saw nothing. Not me, not the room, not the cracked statue, just darkness. I stepped back, confused. Was it covered in soot, or was this some decayed decoration? Then, something flickered. Movement. A shape right behind me. I spun around. No one. I looked back at the mirror. There was a man standing behind me. Pale face, sunken eyes, mouth sewn shut with something black and glistening. He was there, staring at me in the mirror, but not in real life. I frowned. My breath caught in my throat, like a confession I couldn't voice. I stepped left. Right. My body moved. His didn't. He wasn't copying me. He wasn't me. And then he lifted a hand slowly and pointed to my chest. No, to my heart. That's when I noticed the crimson smear forming in the center of my reflection. Like blood, but not mine. Not yet. I blinked. The man was gone. The stain was gone. But I knew something ancient had just looked at me. And it did not blink. Some mirrors reflect your face. This one shows what heaven turned away from. Next time, I find out who the man was and what my mother saw before she died. Episode 2: Those the church forgot to forgive. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time in years, I prayed and heard nothing back. No peace, no whisper of comfort, just silence, thick as wax, pressed into my ears. The next morning, I returned to the chapel, not because I was brave, but because my mother had once told me something I never understood until now. If the church forgets to forgive you, Elias, God might, too. Back then, I thought she was being dramatic. Nah, her grave was still warm, and the mirror was still waiting. But I didn't go straight to it. Not this time. I needed answers, history, the truth that priests hide in the basement. So I broke into the old rectory, behind the chapel where the last priest had lived before vanishing. The door was unlocked. Not a good sign. Inside, it smelled of old paper and holy oil. I found a cabinet marked Sanctuary Incidents NFIDNTIAL. The files were damp, some chewed by mice, but some untouched. I read, March 3rd, Mrs. L. claimed the mirror showed her son's body dripping blood. He's alive. She hung herself 2 days later. March 10th, Mr. Elvis said he saw a girl praying behind him in the mirror. He turned. No one. 4 hours later, he lit himself on fire in the pew. March 20th. They're not hallucinating. The mirror reflects something. I've started to see myself in it, but only when I lie. 13 deaths. All sudden. All within 3 months of the mirror being uncovered accidentally during altar renovations. But here's what chilled my bones. None of them have received final confession before death. All were buried without absolution. No wonder the church shut it down. No press, no funeral bells, just silence. I closed the cabinet and turned to leave when I heard it. A knock, not on the door, not on the wall, from the mirror in the chapel, as if it remembered I hadn't finished watching. I didn't run, but I walked out with one truth carved into me like scripture. The mirror doesn't show the dead, it shows the unforgiven, and my mother had seen someone in it, maybe herself. I thought I was chasing her ghost, but the more I read, the more I realize something horrifying. She wasn't the first to see it. She might have been the last one to survive it. Next time, I find out who saw the mirror and lived. Episode 3, The Nun Who Disappeared Without Confession. Her name was Sister Maria Ephraim, a woman no one remembered except the mirror. I found her journal hidden in the folds of an old choir robe, tucked behind the organ, beneath broken pipes and a collapsed crucifix. No photos, no parish records, not even a death certificate, just 15 pages, trembling handwriting, ink that looked like it had bled from the vein. They say God sees all, but what if He chooses not to see us? What if He turns His face away? I read her words by the light of a single candle, as rain clawed the chapel roof like fingernails. She wasn't afraid of demons. She was afraid of being forgotten. I have kept no sin from the confessional. I have lived by the cloth, and still it shows me. She meant the mirror. Every time I kneel before it, I see a version of myself I do not recognize. Hollowed, ashen, a wound on the center of my brow, like a second mouth that bleeds without sound. She described what I had seen in my mother's reflection. Forgiveness cannot be claimed, it must be received. And what if heaven is silent? The last page of her journal was not written, it was scratched with something sharp, violent, not ink, but ashes and wax. I begged the mirror to show me anything else. It never did. So tonight, I will do the unthinkable. I will die without confession. If God comes for me, He will have to see me first. That line shook me more than any scream ever could, because buried under her final entry was a pressed rosary, but the crucifix had no Christ on it. He was gone, erased. I went back to the mirror that night. I didn't expect to see her, but I did. Not as a ghost, not as a memory. She stood there in the glass alive, breathing and kneeling in the exact pose of her final prayer. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out, and where set her mouth was sewn shut. She lifted her eyes, not at me, but at someone being me. Her gaze didn't beg for mercy, it begged for witness. And then she pointed to the pew where I had once Saturday as a child, to the place my mother always made me kneel. That's when I noticed it, a scratch on the wood, nearly invisible, 4 letters carved by trembling hands. Elia. She never finished the S. The dead don't speak in that chapel, but somehow they still leave messages. Next time, I sit in the pew, and I read what my mother carved beneath it. Episode 4, Letters Written in Ashes. The 4th pew from the altar, left side. That's where my mother always made me kneel. She said it was closer to mercy. Now I know she meant closer to Him, or maybe closer to what she feared He'd forgotten. I brought a knife that night, not out of fear, but because some truths are carved, not written, though it was old, soft from time and tears. I pressed the blade gently under the scratch that spelled Elia The name she nearly finished. There was more. Hidden beneath the top layer of varnish were letters burned shallowly, almost erased by time or intention. I scraped carefully and revealed a message. The mirror showed me who He left behind. I didn't understand. Was she talking about me, my father, herself? And then I saw it wedged deep in the crack of the pew, wrapped in dry, black cloth, a page torn from the Bible, but the verse had been scorched, the ink bubbling, letters curled and gray. Still, some words clung to the edge of life. And He will turn His face from the prayers of the wicked. Even if they weep, they shall not be heard. At the bottom, written in her handwriting tight, desperate, I tried, I prayed for you, Elias, but He never answered. He never looked. My hands trembled, not from fear but from rage. Rage at silence, at heaven's locked doors, at a God who would let a mother pray until her knees broke and still say nothing. I stood and faced the mirror. This time, I didn't blink. This time, I spoke. Show me what she saw. Show me what made her believe. Even God forgot. At first nothing, but then the glass turned darker than black. It didn't reflect. It devoured. My breath fought it, but only my breath appeared. And then, a flash, a glimpse, a boy, no, a child, but not of now, kneeling, alone, whispering a prayer with no sound. And behind him rows of figures, all facing away, not toward the altar, not toward salvation. They were staring into the mirror. All of them had blood on their brows. Some wept, some smiled, and one reached forward, not through the glass from inside it. His hand pressed to the inside of the mirror. as if begging me to take it. His mouth opened. I heard a single word. Why? Then it was gone. Some letters are written in ink. Others are written in what's left after faith burns away. Next time, I opened the confessional, and I finally asked, what did the priest see before he vanished? Episode 5. My mother's reflection had blood on her forehead. She never talked about sin, not even in whispers. My mother only spoke of repentance, like it was a placer room in heaven you had to earn a key to enter. But I think now, she never got the door to open, and I think the mirror showed her why. That night, I returned to the chapel with a single candle and her photo, one taken a week before she died. She was smiling, but her eyes, they were already saying goodbye. I placed the photo in front of the mirror. I didn't speak, didn't pray, just stared. The mirror stared back. At first, only the chapel behind me appeared distorted, stretched, like it had aged centuries since I walked in. Then slowly, my mother appeared, not in the photo. In the mirror, she was standing beside mine, the reflection, only wearing the same dress from the picture. But it was soaked, not with water, with something thicker. Her eyes were open, but clouded like glass left in rain too long. Her hands trembled at her sides, and on her forehead, a streak of blood, thin at first, then pooling downward, tracing the bridge of her nose. Lips, chin, it didn't drip, it clung to her, like it belonged there. I whispered, "Mom." Her lips moved, but I heard no words, only the distant sound of pages flipping in an empty room. Then she raised her hand. Her fingers pointed directly at me. No, not at me. My chest, my heart, just like the man in the mirror had done. She pressed her palm flat against the glass from the inside, and that's when the candle flickered violently. Its flame twisted sideways, pointing not at the mirror, but toward the confessional booth behind me, as if something wanted me to turn. I did. The wooden door creaked, not open, but inward, like something was pulling it from inside. I approached, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the shadows felt wrong, like they weren't caused by absence of light but by presence of something else. The bench was cracked, the air tasted like soot and vinegar, and on the wall, carved deep into the wood, were words. The mirror shows the wound, but the confessional shows the knife. I backed away, breathing hard. When I turned around, my mother's reflection was gone, but the blood, it was still smeared across the glass. Only this time, it wasn't on her. It was shaped like a handprint, my size. She saw it before she died. Now I'm seeing what she saw, but worse. I think the mirror is starting to show me myself. Next time, I enter the confessional, and the door locks behind me. Episode 6. The day God stopped listening. The confessional smelled like wood and rot, but beneath that something metallic, like old blood that no longer drips, only lingers. I didn't plan to go in. I told myself I'd never kneel where the priest once listened to sinners with tired eyes, but the mirror kept pointing me, hearing me mother's gaze, the candle's flame, the carved words. So I entered, and the door shut behind me. By itself, the booth was smaller than I remembered. The wood groaned beneath my knees like it was protesting my presence. There was no priest on the other side, only silence. And yet, I spoke. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." The moment the words left my mouth, the air shifted, cold, like ice being poured down my spine, but no voice answered. Instead, I heard a scratching sound, faint, low, deliberate, like something was writing behind the wall. I pressed my ear to the wood, and I heard breathing, heavy, ragged, too low to be human. Then, a voice, not out loud but inside me. "Do you want to be heard or seen?" My mouth went dry. I whispered, "What?" Silence. Then a violent gust of cold swept through the booth, and the lantern I had brought snuffed out. Darkness, total, suffocating, and light from the mirror. Somehow, I could see it through the thin wooden slats. The mirror was glowing, like it was alive, like it had been waiting, and in its glow, a priest, but not any priest. His face was melted on one side, like wax too close to flame. His collar was charred, his eyes missing. He sat Saturday in the priest's side of the confessional, but only in the reflection. Then he spoken it to me, but to someone long dead. They confessed lies, and God never answered, so I burned my ears and listened only to the mirror. His hands rose slowly, trembling, and placed something on that invisible wall between us. It was a crucifix, melted, twisted, bleeding, and behind Hyman the mirror's surface words began to appear, etched from inside. The last prayer spoken here, Washington S. Northeast for heard. I screamed and pushed open the booth. The door flew wide. The chapel was empty. The mirror stood silent, but carved now. Deep in the wood of the confessional bench, fresh and bleeding, was my name, Elias. That priest tried to listen to sinners, but when heaven stopped responding, he listened to something else, something that hears without forgiving. Next time, I follow the voice behind the mirror. Episode 7, The Boy Who Burned the Confessional. The first time I heard his name, it was whispered from a mouth that didn't move. Not lips, not flesh, but a voice that rose from wood like breath trapped inside the grain. Jacob, just that, one name, no less, no age, no face. I dug through the parish death logs, the priest's journal, even the town's burial records. Nothing, until I found a photograph torn, curled, and buried beneath the altar tiles. A class portrait, 12 children, but one of them had been burned out of the image. Not scratched, not torn, burned, deliberate, controlled, precise. The name beneath the scorched child's place read, Jacob E., the same first letter as mine. I returned to the chapel, carrying that photo like a warning. This time, I didn't speak. The mirror did. It hummed, a sound I didn't hear with my ears, but with my teeth, my bones, the pit of my stomach. Then it showed me him, a boy, maybe 9, maybe younger, standing in front of the confessional booth, holding something in his hands, a match, a crucifix, and a torn page of scripture. He wasn't crying, he was smiling. He turned to the confessional, opened the door, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he lit the page, held it to the crucifix, and watched it all burn. The priest inside never came out. In the reflection, the booth went up in flames, but in reality, the wood remained cold, still charred, still whole, as if time had frowned in the wound. Then the boy looked toward the mirror, and for the first time directly at me. His eyes were not evil, but empty, like something had been scooped out and replaced with silence. His lips moved. He lied. He said forgiveness was free, and he vanished. Smoke filled the reflection, pouring outward almost into the chapel itself. I dropped the photo. It curled at my feet, blackening as if remembering the flame. I reached for it, but the paper crumbled in my hands, all except one part, a sliver of Jacob's burned outline, and written across it, scrawled in a child's shaky hand, the mirror knows who never meant it. That night, I dreamed of the confessional burning. Only this time, I was inside, and something stood outside and whispered, "Say it like you mean it this time, Elias." Jacob wasn't trying to destroy the church. He was trying to destroy a lie. Next time, I speak to someone who should be dead, but still answers prayers no one dares to say out loud. Episode 8, The Priest Who Saw Himself Vanish. I thought it was just a rumor, a priest who served here long before my mother's time. No death record, no obituary, just a single chilling entry in the church archives, stamped with red ink, transferred to silence. That's not a location, it's a sentence. His name was Father Aurelius Calderon, and apparently, he stopped seeing himself in mirrors. At first, I assumed it was madness, but I found his Bible in a locked drawer beneath the pulpit. The pages smelled like ash and candle oil. Inside were handwritten notes, margins scrawled with words I couldn't forget if I tried. I have prayed for absolution, but the mirror reveals a truth beyond grace. My reflection fades more each day, not from light, but from judgment. I no longer cast a shadow in this house. And one more, on a loose slip between psalms. If the soul is missing, what does the glass reflect? That night, I waited until the chapel was bathed in moonlight. I stood before the mirror, alone, and said his name aloud, Father Aurelius Calderon. Nothing, until the glass rippled, not like water, no, like breath against skin. Then, there he was, tall, gaunt, hollow-eyed, wearing his cassock, no crucifix. He stood inside the mirror, but he didn't look out. He looked away, as if the chapel disgusted him. Then he did something that shattered me. He reached forward, his hand pressed against the mirror from inside, and it vanished. as if the glass had swallowed his armhole. I gasped. My breath fogged the surface. When the fog cleared, his hand was now outside the mirror, inches from mine, and carved into his palm flesh torn by some sacred blade were words I will never erase from memory. I am not dead. I am just not forgiven. Then the glass cracked. Just a fracture. A hairline slit from corner to corner, and through it he saw nothing but blackness. No chapel, no stars, just a place where reflections go when they are no longer yours. He whispered, Edmund unmoving, "You're starting to fade. Elias, your image is not your own anymore." And he was gone. Only the crack remained. I touched it, and I felt warmth, not from my body, but as if something on the other side was waiting, breathing, and hungry. He didn't vanish into death. He vanished into the truth behind the glass. Next time, I see what happens to those who stare too long and forget which side they belong to. Episode 9. The night the chapel screamed. The mirror had cracked, not shattered but split just enough to feel like a wound. And wounds bleed, even if glass doesn't. That night, I didn't sleep because the chapel didn't want me to. At precisely 3:03 a.m., that church bell rang. It hasn't worked in years. Rusted, forgotten, no rope, but it rang 3 times. And when I opened my eyes, the mirror was no longer reflecting the chapel. It was reflecting me sleeping from the ceiling above my bed. I returned to the chapel, barefoot, shivering, heart pounding like judgment in my ears. Something in me whispered not to go in, but curiosity is never holy. It's a sin we dress in questions. And tonight he sang gladly. The chapel door stood open, not wide, just enough, as if it had been cracked by a whisper too loud. Inside, every candle was lit, but no flame moved, no wax dripped. Time had gone still, and then I heard it, a scream, not from a person, from the walls. They groaned first, like they were remembering something they buried too deep. Then came the cracking of wood, the moan of stone shifting where it shouldn't, and finally, the pews began to shake, each one by one, violently trembling. Dust fell like ash from the rafters, and then the statues began to turn. The saints, the martyrs, the angels' their heads rotated slowly toward the mirror. Some had no eyes, others bled from their sockets. The Virgin Mary, the one above the altar, cracked straight down the middle of her face, revealing a second face beneath. It was mine, but twisted, hollow-eyed, lips sewn shut with rosary beads. And then the glass screamed, not the chapel, the mirror. It let out a sound like glass being torn apart from the inside, a shriek that filled the air without moving it, a cry not of pain, but of recognition. Something had finally noticed me, and Morseed had waited long enough. The mirror darkened, turned red, then bled across the chapel floor like a slit throat. It formed a trail, a path, to the confessional. Again, but this time, something waited inside. Not a priest, not a child, but a voice I knew. You were born in here, Elias. Now you must be judged here. I turned to run, and all the candles blew out at once. Dark, dead, holy. The chapel doesn't just hold memory, it holds sentence. Next time, I learned what my mother saw the night she begged God to stay and he didn't. Episode 10. The child who remembered dying here. He was already sitting in the front pew when I entered, small, still, facing the altar, like it belonged there. But no child should belong Herenet in this chapel, not near that mirror. And when I blinked it was gone. I should have left. I should have turned and sealed this place shut with nails and prayers, and every drop of holy water I could find. But the mirror had already seen me, and once it sees you, you belong to it. I stepped closer to where the boy had been. There, on the pew, something etched in tiny, childlike handwriting. I wasn't supposed to be born, so they buried me in his house. I turned slowly. The confessional door was open again, not wide, just enough. The trail of dried blood from before had turned fresh, wet, leading inside. But it wasn't blood, it was ink, and it formed words on the floor as I approached. Read him before he disappears again. I stepped inside, heart thundering, and there he was, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the confessional, baked in faint red glow. Not a ghost, not fully, more like memory stitched to breath. He looked up, eyes pale, as if rinsed in milk, and he smiled. Are you Elias? Yes, good. Then I can forget now. I knelt. His voice was quiet, but the chapel echoed it anyway. I died here, but not all at once. They told me I was born with sin in my skin, that God never meant to hear my cries, so they made me confess before I could speak. And when I didn't say the words right, they stopped feeding me. Tears blurred my vision. I reached for him and leaned back, flinching. Don't touch me, I'm already being erased. His skin began to blur, like wind on water. His mouth moved slower, his hands trembled. I see him, Elias, but he won't look at me. He raised a trembling finger to the mirror, which had begun to ripple, and through it, I saw the impossible. Rows of children, all lined up, all barefoot, all silent, each holding a small, black cross that melted in their grip. Their reflections were clear in the mirror, but they didn't exist in the room. We weren't forgiven, he whispered. We weren't even prayed for. And then he was gone, not vanished, erased, like a chalk outline wiped by invisible hands. Only one thing remained in the confessional. A child's drawing, crude, shaky, but real. It was me, standing before the mirror, and beneath my feet, an open grave. Some children die without sin, others die because of it. Next time, I uncover what my mother saw buried beneath the chapel floor, and why she never spoke about my birth. Episode 11, my name carved in the glass. I never told the mirror my name, but it knew. That night, I returned with trembling hands and dirt on my palms. I'd spent hours digging in the graveyard behind the chapel searching for records, headstones, anything connected to the child who remembered dying here. But there was no grave, no coffin, only soil that smelled too fresh for a place so forgotten. I returned to the chapel at midnight. The moment I stepped inside, the pews groaned like wood, but like old lungs filling with air. The mirror stood still, cracked and dark as obsidian. But something had changed. The floor was cold, slick beneath my boots. The wet hand rained, and then I saw it, on the surface of the mirror. A name, carved from the inside. Not written, not etched, gouged, as if someone had clawed it in desperation. Elias, my name, but not by my hand. I took a step back. The crack that had stretched across the mirror now formed a cross, splitting directly through the eye like a blade dividing the leaf. Suddenly, the mirror began to glow up with light, but with memory. It showed me a room, not the chapel, not a home, a birthing ward, white walls, silent nurses, a woman screaming without sound. My mother, her face pale, lips bitten bloody, her eyes locked on something off-screen. And then, a priest appeared. He wasn't praying, he was writing on a slip of paper, folding it, placing it in my mother's shaking hand. The camera mirror panned down to me, newborn, silent, not crying, just watching, and then the vision broke. The mirror flickered like a broken reel of film. And no, my mother stood in it, older, worn, crying. She held the same slip of paper, opened it, read it aloud, lips trembling. He is not written in the book of the forgiven. Her knees buckled. She reached for the altar, but instead of grabbing the crucifix, she grabbed a shard of glass from the mirror, and she carved the name, Elias, into it. Her own child, condemned. Before his first sin, I stumbled backward. My reflection in the mirror stood still, but then it smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly, and in its voice in it mine I heard, "You were born in this chapel, Elias, but not into grace. You were born into the silence between prayers." I thought I was hunting ghosts. Now I know I am one. Next time, I open the floor beneath the altar and find what they buried with my name. Episode 12, the last forgiveness never given. There's a trapdoor beneath the altar. I always thought it was a storage hatch or a passage for old priests to vanish unseen. But last night, I learned it was neither. It was a tomb for a prayer that God never answered. The key was hidden behind the chalice, rusted, nearly fused with the wood. The lock fought me, groaned like it didn't want to be opened, but then it gave way, and the floor breathed open. A stairwell led downward, into the earth beneath the chapel. No candles, no icons, just stone walls pulsing with Mewtwo and something else. Whispers. They didn't speak words, they repeated names, over and over. Some I recognized, some I didn't, but one name echoed louder than the rest. Maria. Sister Maria, the nun who vanished without confession. Her voice threaded through the silence like a rosary, unraveling mid-prayer. I descended until the air felt too thick to inhale, and then I saw it, a room, not wide, not tall, but eternal, lined with mirrors, down scenes, each cracked, each facing inward toward a central altar made of bones. Real, human, arranged into a crucifix, and behind it, a single object, a black book. I reached for it, and the moment my hand touched the cover, every mirror lit up, not with light, with reflections, mine, but not mine, down scenes of versions of me, older, younger, bloodied, smiling, screaming, each one holding something different, a knife, a rosary, a newborn child, a burning Bible. I frowned, see, and then the book opened on its own. Its pages flipped wildly, as if caught in a when only it could feel. Then it stopped, blank page, until slowly it began to rise from beneath. One sentence: the last forgiveness was never given because it was never asked. My hands trembled. I whispered, "Forgive me." The mirrors didn't move, so I shouted, "Forgive me." Stillness. Then, a voice from behind me, not loud, not human, "Say it to the one you never forgave." I turned, and there she stood, my mother, not spectral, not monstrous, just wounded, her eyes full of something deeper than sorrow. She stepped forward and placed her hand on my chest right where the mirror always pointed. "You kept asking for forgiveness, Elias, but never gave it back. Not to me, not to yourself." And then she smiled, not the smile of the damned, but of someone hurt. The mirrors shattered, one by one, and as the shards fell, I saw it clearly for the first time. My true reflection, not perfect, not forgiven, but finally seen. You cannot beg heaven to hear you if you still curse the voice inside. Next time, the mirror calls me by a name I've never spoken out loud, because the final truth isn't about who's forgiven, it's about who was never allowed to exist. Episode 13, The Reflection That Spoke My True Name. I thought my name was Elias. I thought that was the name my mother whispered when she prayed in the dark, when she clutched the rosary until it drew blood, when she begged God to answer with silence instead of wrath. But the mirror always knew better, and tonight it told me the truth. I returned to the chapel, not to seek forgiveness, not to confess, but to face what I truly was. The floorboards felt soft beneath my feet, like breath, like flesh. Every step deeper into the chapel made my body feel heavier, as if something was trying to pull me back into the walls I came from. The altar was cracked open like a ribcage. The trapdoor still gaped, and the mirror no longer reflected the chapel at all. It reflected a sky without stars, a horizon of ash, and a cross that had no body nailed to it, a name. But not Elias, not the name I carried all my life. Instead, the name carved into the sky above that cross was, "He who Washington asked northeast for blessed." I stepped closer. My reflection stood there, but it was not me. Taller, eyes darker, mouth sewn shut with scripture pages, bleeding ink. He raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned. The chapel was gone. I was standing in a mirror of the mirror, an endless cathedral made of glass and breath and judgment, and in the center, a throne, empty until now. The boy Jacob walked forward from the edge of nowhere. He looked up at me. "You were never supposed to live," but she begged anyway. "She carved your name into the edge of heaven, and so they wrote you down, not in the book of life, but in the margin, in the cracks, where the forgiven never look." My voice broke. "What am I?" Jacob didn't smile. "You are the echo of a prayer God never wanted to hear." The mirror behind him cracked again, then again, until every piece of glass in this cathedral of silence began to fall. And as it shattered, I saw every version of myself scream, some in agony, some in truth, some in joy, and one, only one, spoke through blood, through glass, through the final wound. He whispered a name I'd never heard before, but it was mine, not Elias. Something older, buried, unwritten. And when I turned around, the throne was no longer empty. I was sitting in it. The mirror never judged me. It revealed me. I wasn't born forgotten. I was born unwritten. And now I finally exist, even if heaven never called me by name.